posterity. At the end of the day, we'll put it up on the Youth Recreational Facilities website for folks who couldn't attend, or if you want to just go back and refer. We will also get a transcript of the chat and create an FAQ for that, so everyone else can benefit from your questions. The way we're going to roll it is if when you have a question, please put it in the chat. And then at the end of the PowerPoint, we will go through the questions and get them all answered. The Zoom is scheduled for 2 hours. I doubt it will go that long, but we wanted enough time to make sure everybody got all our questions answered. And so my guess is it'll be 90 minutes at the outside. All righty, here we go. Welcome again. My name is Michael Campbell. I'm with the State Department of Commerce, and we're here today to talk about the Youth Recreational Facilities Grant. This is for the 23-25 capital budget, which means it's a ways out. This process is a little different from a lot of grants where the legislature will appropriate money and then Commerce or another state agency will dole out the money. In this case, we run the process, it gets the grants and the lists get approved by the board, and then it goes to the governor and the legislature, and they can pick and choose who and what they want to fund and at what level. In our case, they 99% of the time they'll fund the entire list as is. So we're hopefully that they will do so again. We'll go over the timeline in a bit. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this is, I just want to stress what a long process this is. It will, it's good if you're really early, it's good that you're getting in now. And if you're far along, then you'll be ready to hit the ground running. All righty. And panelists, please interrupt if I'm missing something or if you have something to share. And push. There we go. Who the heck is the Department of Commerce? What the heck are we? After we go this, we're going to introduce the Commerce folks. But we want to make sure everybody knows that we do a lot of things. When the legislature has something that they want to appropriate money for, or there's a problem they think they want to fix, if it doesn't fit in one of the larger agencies like health or ecology, they'll call on us. We're sort of the Swiss Army knife of the executive branch. We have projects, programs for housing and homelessness infrastructure, which is what we're a part of at the community capital facilities, business assistance, energy assistance. There's some planning grants, community facilities, again, the facilities that you all are contemplating, crime victims and public safety, and community services. We do a lot. And the reason why we put this slide in front of the page is we want you to go to our website, commerce.wa.gov. And at the front, you will be able to sign up for grants of all types. You'll be able to pick and choose what type you're interested in, and you'll be able to see all of the assistance that Commerce gives. Now I want to introduce the Commerce team. Let's start with Beth Robinson.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Beth Robinson. I'm one of the supervisors in the Community Capital Facilities team, and specifically for the 3 competitive programs.
And Cheryl Reed.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Reed, Capital Program Supervisor in the same unit as Beth, and I supervise the local and community projects.
And let's go over to Heather.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Heather. I'm the supervisor for the Real Estate Development and Services team.
And Heather will be able to answer any kind of real estate and security questions you may have. And Karma.
Good morning. My name is Karma Shannon Hart-Lawson, and I work with our guru Heather on the Real Estate Development and Services team.
And last but not least, Michael.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Michael Boyd, and I am also with the Real Estate Development and Services team.
Thanks. Under Beth and Cheryl are soon to be 9 people, I think. We're growing
Yes.
fast. And then Heather and her team can answer again all of your real estate questions. We will emphasize this over and over. If you have any question at all, please let us know. You can contact me. You can contact the program managers who are listed in the guidelines. You can, anybody, we can all, if we can't answer your question, by gosh, we can find someone who can. Alrighty, I'm gonna see if I can advance it. There you go, yay! Youth Recreational Facilities Program, what the heck is it? So we can fund capital facilities building, right? We're funded with bonds, so it can do capital buildings, either new construction, renovation, or in some rare cases, we can even fund a turnkey facility, a brand new facility that doesn't need any renovation. To be able to apply, it needs to be indoors. It's an indoor recreation with an educational and or a social service component. And a good example to think of is a boys and girls club. There's a gymnasium, activities room, and they'll also offer after school homework assistance and all sorts of stuff for kids to keep them out of trouble. But you don't have to be a boys and girls club. You just sort of have to fit that bill. The projects need to be available during non-school hours and during the summer, and there has to be programming for all comers, for all kids in that programming. It can grant up to 1.2 million per project, so it's not bad. It can fund 25% of your capital costs. And so to get that 1.2 million, you would need to have 12, 4.8. I have my Montessori math, yeah, 4.8 million in eligible capital costs. And it's a little tricky. We'll go over what's eligible and what's not eligible. Suffice to say, bricks and mortar is what we can fund, and operating costs, fundraising, feasibility study is what it can't fund. We have a cap of $8 million for the total list. So if we have a heavy subscription and there are a bunch of $1.2 million projects, the board will generally start cutting the max projects to make sure all of the projects can get in and get something. So to have no fear, if you're a smaller projects, we love them, especially in rural and underserved areas. We would really love to see them. And again, we can match up to 25% of those eligible capital costs. And just a reminder, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. We're keeping track. And at the end of this, we will go and answer all those questions and answer all the follow-up questions. Off we go. So, more guidelines. Who can apply? Tribes and nonprofit agencies can apply. You don't need to be a 501c3, but you do need to be registered in the state of Washington as a nonprofit. And it's not too difficult or onerous. Coming in, by the time the grant is due, you need to have control of the project site. And that's either through ownership or a long-term lease of at least 15 years. We only fund 25%, so we require matching funds from the grantee. That could be from any non-state source. It could be from the county, the feds, local government, private foundations, wherever you can get it. We know it's hard to raise money. And so it just needs to be demonstrated with a commitment letter. And then when it comes time, if you do get a grant, you need to show us that the money's in the bank. The non-state share to complete the projects must be committed before the funds are released. This is a point I really want to stress because it's a little confusing and folks can get hung up on it. You do not need to have the total non-state share raised at the time of application. You do need to have shown that you've gone into a capital campaign and that you've raised some non-state money. And there's no bright line about how much, what type of percentage that should be. It varies from project to project. Rural projects are where there's not a lot of tax base. It's a lot harder to raise money. So the board will take that into account when looking at how much non-state funds folks have raised. All right. So at the end of the day, if you do get a grant, again, that's when you need to have the entire non-state share raised before we can go to contract. That's the difference. Coming in, you don't need all the money. Once you're ready to go and you get the grant, you do. All righty. Reimbursement only. And so because we're funded with bonds, we can't advance payments. But we don't want folks to have to go out and take a 30-day loan or something like that to show us that they've paid the contractor and then send us the invoice for reimbursement. So to help folks along in that regard, if you incur a cost, you can submit that invoice for reimbursement. We will then reimburse you 25% of that cost. That's how we make sure it's only 25% of state funds in the project. And then you'll have 30 days to show us that you paid the entire invoice. So we try to help you along in that regard wherever we can. Moving on. All right. What can it pay for? This is the good stuff. I'm growing my beard, although I shaved it a little bit because I like playing Santa and like giving away money. What can you use this for? Bricks and mortar. So it's essentially anything that you normally don't spend money on during your normal operations that you are spending money on to construct or renovate this facility. Bricks and mortar are A&E, obviously. Land acquisition if it's part of a larger construction or renovation project. If we cannot fund just land, but if you do have a larger project with land and construction and renovation, we can fund that land acquisition. Building permitting and fees, and you need all of this stuff to get your project done. Demo and site prep. Capitalized equipment. This one's a little vague, but it's a pretty good deal. The best way to describe capitalized equipment is using an example of a bookshelf or a bookcase. If the bookshelf is in the wall, if it's part of the construction, it would be considered a construction line item cost. If, however, it's a freestanding bookcase and it can last at least 13 years, I sure hope most of them can. I've grown up with some that couldn't. But if it can last at least 13 years, we can help pay for that too. We can pay for 25% of that. So furniture, tables, chairs, as long as they can last at least 13 years, we can help you there. IT infrastructure. And this one I want to lean on as well. IT infrastructure we define as the wiring inside the walls, the fiber optic cable, that kind of stuff. What we can't fund are computers or computer equipment. Sorry. That's if you think about the computers you were using 13 years ago, or maybe the cell phone you're using 13 years ago, it's not doing too good. Right? So some of them might be limping along, but that type of computer technology we can't fund. It's if it can last 13 years, and we're talking about maybe a sophisticated HVAC system that has a computerized component, we can probably go there, but we need to take a look at it and make sure it's professional and not consumer grade, but odds are it'll be just fine. So what we can't pay for, again, internal administrative costs, your salaries, your benefits, anything like that, fundraising, internal project management. If you have a need for and hire an external project manager, which can be handy, we can help pay for that. It would be similar to paying for an architect, right? it can't be someone who's a part of your organization. So otherwise that would be considered an operating cost. Feasibility studies. Some projects need them, some don't. For larger projects and most projects in general, they're a good idea, but we cannot reimburse for them. It's because at the end of the day, there might not be a project. So they're off the hook. We talked about computers. Rolling stock, what's that? In the case of youth rec, it's most oftentimes vans, transportation, any kind of automobile that can't reimburse you for. Even maybe your big gymnasium has a real cherry picker, those big cranes that come up and down, maybe adjust stuff in the rafters. Can't pay for those either. And we can't pay for your moving costs. All right. Moving up. With free money comes great responsibility. There are a lot of statutory requirements for receiving these funds, and we're going to go over a few of those. The first is prevailing wage. So any project, and not just for youth rec, but any project included in the capital budget has to agree to pay prevailing wages beginning the day the governor signs the budget. So we're talking about the 23-25 biennium. So odds are the governor will sign around April or May, knock on wood, of 2023. And that date he signs, that's when your project will be on the hook to pay prevailing wages. So if you're starting before the governor signs, it's important to keep that in mind. An added point on this that I don't think I put in the PowerPoint, but it is in the guidelines, is because this is such a long process and it's sort of backwards, we will reimburse you for work that you've done before the governor signs. And in this case, this is the 23-25 biennium. So we'll be able to go back to July 1 of 2020. Is that right there? July 1, 2020 for it to reimburse you for invoices that are for eligible capital costs that you put in your application. This is important to remember because I know a lot of folks with construction costs just through the roof that they don't want to wait anymore. They don't want to risk their budget getting blown up and they want to start. And that's okay. As long as you save those receipts, we can go back again to July 1 of 2020 is to reimburse you for eligible invoices. All right, that's kind of cool. Acquisition only projects are exempt. There's no prevailing wage for real estate agents. Thank goodness. Although they probably like it. And but it must result in a usable facility. If it's acquisition only, it's got to be turnkey. It's got to be ready to go. The Department of Labor and Industries are the ones who are in charge of enforcing this. And we put a link. They have a pretty good email address and hotline, and they're fairly responsive. I've been pretty impressed. Something that I will also want to bring up that can be a little nuanced. A lot of projects these days are mixed use projects. It's like maybe ground floor with retail or your service delivery, and then up above, maybe the top 3 or 4 floors are housing. Prevailing wages, let's again talk about prevailing wage. Prevailing wage is a rate of wage that the state sets for each county. So it varies by county. And it's how much each job should get paid or must get paid on these types of projects. So the plumber, the electrician, that kind of job, every county will have a set of prevailing wages. Within that list, there are also categories for the type of building that change the rate of wage. Specifically here, it's commercial versus residential. And that's where these mixed use buildings get a little tricky. So you'll have a commercial rate of wage and then a residential rate of wage. And this is where I really recommend you go to labor and industries. They are the end all be all of this issue, whether or not you have to pay commercial for everything or residential for everything. That is absolutely a question for them. And it may actually evolve. It probably evolves and changes. So if you have one of those projects, I would highly recommend getting a hold of Al and I, because it will determine your project budget. It will help determine your project budget. You're going to need that for sure. All righty. Moving on. Archaeological review. There are two parts to this. This is under Executive Order 2102. And before we get started with contracting, there are two things you need to do. You need to notify all the affected tribes in the area of what you're going to do. And that's because the example I used was many years ago. There was a Department of Transportation project that spent millions and millions of dollars and then dug up some very culturally sensitive artifacts, and that project was done. It was immediately done the second they did it. And the governor, who was Christine Gregoire at the time, said that's not a real good idea. So she wrote an executive order which has evolved into Executive Order 2102. So we want the tribes to know where you're digging, and we also want the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation to know. They have maps of areas where they think or know might have sensitive materials, and they also want to look at your building and whether if it's renovation, if it's a historic building, and what if it is, and that's generally older than 50 years, then they'll want to know what you're doing and make sure that you can keep the historic character, or at the very least, if you're if you're tearing it down, that you put up some markers and signage that said what was there and then that kind of thing. So if you're a really big project and you're getting federal money and you're going through Section 106, you don't need to do 2102, but we do need to see that your Section 106 is completed before we go to contract. All right. Moving on. High performance building standards, and otherwise known as green buildings. This is LEED, and it's in the capital budget. Any project that is a capital project must be built or renovated to what they call the LEED Silver standard. There are 4 standards for LEED, and that, oh, by the way, that stands for Leadership in Environmental Engineering and Design. I'm pretty sure, or something pretty close. And the 4 levels are certified silver, gold, and platinum. And the legislature wants new buildings to be at least LEED silver. And I've actually been in a few LEED platinum buildings. Wow, they're beautiful and amazing. This will add costs. The idea is that a little more upfront costs will give you savings down the road in energy, efficiency, and provide a nicer place to work, a natural light, most likely, and that kind of thing. The folks who really like these types of rating systems say it'll cost 2 or 3% extra. The folks who really don't like these types of systems will say, well, 10, 20% extra. I've found generally the figure is somewhere in the middle, maybe in 7-ish or so, but it depends entirely on the type of project. And so that's another reason to make sure if you're building or renovating, your architect or project manager knows this, because it will add some costs, but there are a lot of features that they can add into the design that aren't a whole lot of costs, that will get you enough LEED points to get to LEED silver. I mean, things like bicycle racks and building orientation. It's really, really there's a whole lot of stuff, but start early, get in early on the design stuff. There are exemptions, and there are a few of them acquisition only. Obviously, if it's a turnkey project, you're not going to go lead. Projects that involve piecemeal renovations. This is a little nuanced, but it's essentially fixes here and there that don't encompass the entire footprint of the building, and we'll look at those on a case-by-case basis. Generally, there is not a rating system for those, but they're making more and more rating systems every day, so we need to do that case by case. If the new construction is under 5,000 square feet, it is categorically exempt. It's called a facility type exemption. And if it's a renovation where the project's under 5,000 square feet and the budget is less than 50% of the assessed value, including the property, that is categorically exempt. So there are exemptions we can give, and bringing up complicated projects and a mixed use example again, we can offer a not practicable exemption for those where there's a competing residential rating system called the Evergreen Sustainability Standard. And if you are doing a mixed use facility, again, there's the retail or commercial main floor and the residential up above. We feel that it's not practicable for your project to do LEED on the main floor and then Evergreen Sustainability on the upper floors. So we will grant an exemption from LEED as long as the entire facility, including the non-residential, will meet the Evergreen Sustainability standard. All righty. I want to see more questions in that chat. I only see like 8 or so now, so bring them on. Timeline. I can't stress this enough. This is long haul. It's not a sprint. The applications will be due at May 26th at 5 p.m. If inevitably, folks, whenever you're going down to the deadline and your computer crashes or your internet goes down, it happens every time, and that's okay. We're not, just give us a call and we'll talk to you about it. And odds are, once you get everything back rolling, we'll let you submit an application. Right? We don't want to turn people away just because the computer gremlins are playing havoc with you in your time of need. So I want to stress that. Once folks submit their applications, we will scrub them as a staff and then turn them over to our board, who will review them and then convene on July 27th and ask folks to come in and make a very short presentation. They're like me, they would rather all of these be face-to-face meetings. But we know in these days where including the board review will be in Zoom this time around. So to prepare yourself for that, I have 2 pieces of advice. You're only going to have about 7 minutes. They don't want to see PowerPoint presentation. They don't want cheering sections. So only 2 people can present before the board. It's a good idea if it's someone who knows about the project and its construction and use, and someone who knows a lot about the money. These are the 2 things that they want to know. How are you going to raise the rest of the money? And how are you going to keep the lights on and your programmatic activities going once it's built? They don't want to build a building and then have the organization go under because they couldn't keep it going. That's the biggie. Another thing they're going to want to know, you'll see there's the space of about a month between the due date and the board session, they will ask you for if you've made any additional progress in your fundraising, your non-state fundraising. And if you have, maybe some big grant came through in that interim period, they'll love it. They'll say, hey, great job, tell us about it. But 5 to 7 minutes, that's it, fast and furious. How are you gonna raise the non-state money? How are you gonna keep the lights on? That's what you really need to tell us about. At that point, the board will rank and score the projects and allocate the money to $8 million. We will then take that list and it will become part of Commerce's capital budget request to the governor. We're an executive agency, so the governor is our boss, and we'll put that in our capital budget request. That'll be, again, December-ish of 2020, when the governor has had time to chew on all of the capital budget requests from all of the state agencies across the state. And he or she will then submit their capital budget to the House and the Senate. And that's what kicks off the budget season. The House and the Senate will convene probably the second week of January of 2023. They will take a look at all of the pre-filed bills that they've got, everything that they need to get done. And one of their other main tasks is to do 3 budgets, the operating budget, the capital budget, and the transportation budget. And the House and the Senate will each create their own capital budget. And oftentimes they're very different. Generally, these lists, and this list in particular, the youth recreational facilities list, is held harmless by the governor and the House and the Senate. They like these programs because, unlike direct appropriations, where legislators will just put a project in the capital budget, these projects are scrubbed by folks who know what's going on. And so they like these lists a lot. And even, I mean, we're very flush with money right now. Budget forecasts are very good. But even in the tight times, when was that real estate crunch? I think that was the 07-09 budget. Even in the tight times where forecasts are down, they'll spend the money and they will award the whole list. In that case, they want to stimulate the economy and create jobs. And they also know that folks will need more help. So either way, there's a good shot that the entire list will get funded. So we'll knock on wood on that. At that point, the House and the Senate will come together in conference along with the executive and create, at the end of the day, a compromise capital budget. And in that capital budget will be the youth recreational facilities section, and it'll be a list of projects and a list of dollar amount. And when the governor signs that budget, that's when everything is official. We will start gathering all the information. In the case of competitive programs, we'll already have the information. And then we'll send you out all the award materials, including an award letter. And you can take that award letter to the bank. That money is there. You can say, hey, we've got this award letter. As long as we meet these conditions, we will get this amount of money. And banks will say, oh, that's pretty good. If you need maybe a bridge loan for a construction loan, something like that, you can also take it to funders, other funders, private foundation funders, county, city, and it will show that the state has faith in your project, and it's a good thing to have when you're still raising money. So I feel like I'm rambling on. We will then send out all the award materials, and in the meantime, the state will start allocating the funds, selling the bonds, giving us all the coding that we need and that kind of stuff. And the funds will generally be released in September, in this case of 2023. And at that point, we'll also then need to get your contract going and make sure you've done all the pre-contracting requirements that we've gone over. And once the contract's executed, we can start reimbursing. This is a very long process. I can't stress that enough. It's important to factor this stuff in early. And it's the earlier you get, the better. And after we do the Q&A and we go our separate ways, please again, contact us with any questions that we don't answer today or not on the FAQ. We will get back to you right away and make sure you get the information that you need. Alrighty, just a couple of previous projects that I fancy, I don't fancy them all, but these are great. Camp Corey is in Mount Vernon. It's horse riding lessons for developmentally disabled kids. What a great project. How could that go wrong? Names Family YMCA in Tacoma. This is a good example because it's a family YMCA, so they serve more than just youth, but they will also have a teen center, right? That's a nice discrete chunk that we can fund because it serves youth specifically. And then of course, a Boys and Girls Club, it's a model. This is a beautiful Kennewick Clubhouse. And this just gives me another chance to stress how much we want to spread this money across the state. Folks in rural areas in Eastern Washington, down in Vancouver, up in Bellingham, they always say, and sometimes rightly so, that they feel ignored. All the money goes into the Puget Sound, and they don't get their fair shake. It's not true here. When we give this list to the legislature and the governor, we give them a map and say, here's a pin where all of these projects are in. And if all the pins are stuck in the Puget Sound area, that's not a good thing. We want those pins all the way throughout the state. And so don't feel like if you're rural or east of the mountains that you won't get a fair shake. At the end of the day, it's probably going to help a lot. So I can't stress that enough. Come on in, and Puget Sound and everywhere. We want to see it. That's it for my spiel. And I forgot my cough drop, so I'm going to take a drink. Thank you. And let's go to the Q&A. We've got Heather and her team here for securitization questions, and they're great. We're so lucky to have them. Beth and Cheryl, just kidding. So let's see, Cheryl, I'm gonna stop sharing. And Cheryl, can you take it away with the question?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
First question is, will the slides also be available following this?
Absolutely. We'll put them up on the Youth Rec webpage. And again, we'll also take all of these questions. It's transcribing as we speak. We'll turn them into a legible Q&A document, and we'll put that on the website as well.
One said, if this is only for indoors, I must leave.
Oh, sorry. Let me jump in. I hope you haven't left already. Take a look at the Recreation and Conservation Office of the state. You can do a search for Washington RCO, and they actually do outdoor facilities. So I hope you're still here.
Next question. So just for building infrastructure, not tuition costs for low income families, etc.
That's exactly right. And that's because it's funded with the sale of bonds. And bonds can't pay for any kind of operating costs. It would be just for building the building or renovating the building. There are, I think, grants for that. They would be out of the operating budget, and another whole different big budget. Go to the Commerce website, if you would please, and just do a search in the grants section, and hopefully there's something there that can help you.
Question, how much we have to have for the non-state funds raised?
It's a great question. And again, there's no bright line. I would say folks who come in at the bare minimum in a rural area would probably need, well, at least 5% or so. It's not much. You just have to show that you've made some progress in the capital campaign. The more you raise, the better you're going to look. It's going to show that you're more shovel ready and you're chugging right along. But if you haven't raised a whole lot, and in particular, if you're in a rural or underserved area, if you're unsure, give us a call. We'll look at you and your project specifically, or just come on and apply for sure. Don't always err on the side of applying. I would say.
Okay, this one has like 3 questions in it. Can a facility be used by other populations as well as youth?
So the short answer is no. Okay? The idea is that this what we're constructing is just for youth. In some cases, we'll take a look at it. In some cases, if the board thinks it's an excellent project and will serve a lot of youth, we will take a percentage of your youth served and then give you 25% of that. So in other words, if your project is 50-50, right, youth versus adult, we will take we will prorate the project 50%, and then you can apply for 25% of that 50%. But it really has to be a benefit to a lot of youth, and we'll take that on a case-by-case basis.
Can a foundation nonprofit apply?
Sure, but the foundation needs to have control of the project site and the programming, right? So an example I would use would be there are units of local government that also have foundations. Those foundations are just strictly for raising money. So if the foundation is just for that purpose, then no. But if the foundation also controls the site, has site control, right, a lease or a ownership in the foundation's name, and controls the programming, then come on.
And this question goes along with that. Would a foundation sponsored by a park department be eligible?
No. The idea there is the projects that are coming in have, if it's a city project, a city gymnasium, say, units of local government have their own bonding authority. And this money, $8 million, is not a lot of money. It's for nonprofits who are helping kids who can't go out and float their own bond. So that's the idea there.
Would an HVAC system qualify?
Okay, yeah, that's an excellent question. Bond funds generally can't be used for what they call routine maintenance. But HVAC is very important. If you can take that HVAC and stack a whole bunch of repairs on top of it that go along with the HVAC, let's say the roof needs to be adjusted due to the new HVAC or something along those lines, we can turn that into a project. Just paying for just the HVAC, we can't do, but if you throw a few more things in there, we'll take a look at it for sure. Right, the HVAC is really important, and they're always conking out. And as our summers get hotter and hotter, we're going to need a lot of new HVAC. So come call me, talk to me, and then let's talk about it for sure.
Can volunteer labor be used in the construction, i.e. prevailing wage requirement?
Great question. That also brings up in-kind contribution. So in-kind, there are 2 parts to that. You've got in-kind professional. Maybe there's an architect or a plumber who wants to donate to help build your building. We can reimburse you for that. You just need to take that incurred cost, that invoice that they would normally generate, and they've written paid on it, and send it to us. And if it's an eligible cost, we can reimburse you for that. That's a pretty good deal. For non-professional in-kind, actually it's three parts. For non-professional in-kind, there is, we calculate that, the answer is yes. And we'll calculate that at $15 an hour. And you need to document that. A spreadsheet's the best way to go. Their name, contact info, what they're doing, when they worked, and number of hours, and the signature. And we can reimburse you for that too. There are a lot of smaller projects that won't get done without that kind of labor. And the big guys, we're not worried about. They'll get done. They got deep pockets. But smaller, the example I would use is that Plus Delta in, what town is that in? Does anybody remember? Dayton, Washington. Middle of gosh darn nowhere. But boy, they needed a club, and they rolled up their sleeves and they got one. I think it's an old bowling alley. It's really cool. I love that project. So yeah, it takes a lot to do that, and we'll work with you on that. Actually the third type is in-kind materials, and that's the example I would use. There was a project outside of Spokane that was doing a food bank, among other things, and they had a professional grade freezer installed or given to them. And so what we need there is a proof of its value. So maybe there's a comp on that you could buy somewhere where you can show us, hey, it's worth this amount of money. Maybe the person giving it to you can give you a value, but we need some kind of value. Materials like, oh, maybe it's lumber, that kind of thing. We just need a way to verify the value, and we can help you there too. But yeah, it's a cool deal.
Can ESDS be used in lieu of LEED?
So it's as long as, well, it's going to be tricky because we can't fund public schools, which are required to, I think you're talking about the third green building type that are required. First, there's LEED, then there's the Evergreen Sustainability Standard for housing projects. So they cut themselves out of LEED. And I think what you're talking about with the ESD is the school type facility. I would look at it. That'll be a case by case. I would want to take a look at it. But again, we can't generally fund schools, right? So it might not even be an issue, but give me a call. And yeah, I'd be definitely willing to take a look at it.
Are there expectations on how many youth will benefit from the facility? Can the program have registration guidelines and cap of how many kids can be served through this project?
That's a good question. So the short answer is no, because every project is completely different. That Boys and Girls Clubs in Tacoma will serve hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids. And that cool little club in Dayton might serve 30 kids. You know, that's a small town. So the short answer is no. Whether you have, well, the short answer is yes, sorry. Whether you can have a cap, I don't see why you can't. You need, there's a limit to how much these facilities can take, but the board will take a look at that for sure. Obviously, the more kids you serve, depending on the size of your building and your population base, the better. But it won't be a deal killer for sure. Again, especially if you're in a rural or underserved area.
Can this project be a part of an early learning and child care center?
Interesting. So yeah, our unit actually has early learning grants, and boy, they got 500 applications last week, I think. So there's a lot of early learning money out there through the state. If what the early learning money is funding is completely segregated from the youth activity section, then yes. If there's no intermingling of funds, then yes. Because if you're getting money for early learning from the state, then you'd have to subtract that from the amount that you can apply for, that 25%. But if you can make those two completely discrete, separate projects, not a problem.
What are the presentation dates? I'm assuming this is for the board.
Oh, yeah, where was that? It was in the PowerPoint. Betsy, do you have that on hand? I'm afraid to put the PowerPoint back up. It was July.
Give me 1 second.
July 20.
July 27.
July 27. When everybody passes muster, we'll send out an email and give folks time on a first come, first served basis. And it'll be in 10-minute blocks. So you'll get an email saying, hey, congratulations, you're moving on to the board. Send an email here or contact this person. It'll probably be Rania, who is the youth rec program manager, who is in Mexico right now. She was going to try to make it in, but we will forgive her for not being able to get in. But yeah, so that's the day, and then you'll be notified and you'll contact us and we'll get you scheduled.
Can the project serve the greater community in addition to youth programs? For example, an after-school program and youth sports are the primary use, but when not in use by kids, i.e. during the school day, having it be open for general community use?
We take a look at it. Again, we would decrease the amount you could apply for by the ratio of youth served to non-youth served. So it's not a deal killer either.
I'm confused by the 25% matching. It sounds like I need to raise 75% of the cost and Commerce is willing to contribute 25%. Is that right?
Yeah, again, it's two parts. So ultimately, we can only put 25% of state funds into the project. To get in the door, to apply, you do not have to have raised that 75% at all. You do need to show that you worked at least trying to raise some non-state money. Then the second part is, at the end of the day, when you do receive the grant, we won't even go to contract until you can show us the 75% non-state share. And that's to avoid the classic bridge to nowhere. If you're an old timer like me and you grew up in Seattle, you remember those big off ramps by the Kingdom, right? It stopped in the middle of the air because they ran out of money. That looks bad. It makes government look really bad. And that's the last thing we want to do. We want to make sure that when we release the funds, that these projects get built. And that's why we won't release the funds until you have all of the rest of the money needed to complete the project. But you don't need to do that to come in the door. That's for sure.
Am I understanding that if we want to proceed with our project and paying costs as we go, we can still receive reimbursements in 2023 when funds are released?
That is correct. As of July 1 of 2020, just save those invoices and make sure they're eligible costs. And the one thing I will caution with pay-as-you-go is we won't be able to release it in little phases where each phase does not result in a usable project. We can consider a phased project, but at the end of each phase, it's got to be usable to the public. We can't do just the foundation, wait for you to raise money, and then do just the drywall and all that stuff. At the end of the day, we need something that's actually usable.
If the building is mixed use, does the percentage that you provide apply only to the youth activity areas? In our case, we are also promoting intergenerational activities.
Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's only on the facility that we're paying for. It won't include, so like say it's a gymnasium and it's a larger facility and we were only paying for the gymnasium, it would be just the percentage of each used in the gymnasium, because that's all we could pay for.
Can an organization win multiple awards for separate projects?
Yes, a good question. The board has put the limit at 3, but they need to be completely separate projects. They can't spill over, and you can't use your capital campaign and say you have this big pot of money for each project. Each chunk of money needs to be designated to each specific project so the board can actually see how much each individual project has made. We had many years ago an applicant who applied for 7 different projects and submitted the same source of funds raised for all 7 projects. And the board pleaded with this person to prioritize these projects and to separate the funding, and they refused to do it, and they got nothing. So if you're doing multiple projects, you get 3, but each one has to be completely separate and distinct from the other, especially including the sources of funds.
And this goes along with, can an organization include multiple sites in the same proposal?
No, they would have to be separate applications. I think there was one where it was across, the 2 buildings were across the street from each other. We'll take a look at that. That's just sort of common sense. But if they're miles apart, then they'll have to be separate projects.
We're a very small organization with big needs. Is there help with grant writing?
We don't have any funds for grant writing, but by gosh, we can help you write this grant. I mean, you just give us your questions and we'll walk you through it. It is not that hard. It really isn't. But call us and we'll have, by gosh, we love small organizations with big needs, and we'll help you get in, at least fill out the application.
If we get nonprofit status prior to the due date of the application, may we still apply?
Absolutely. Yeah, you just need to I'm not even sure if we document, because it's not 501c3. Do we ask for that documentation? I know we ask for 990s if they're available, but I don't think we actually ask for proof of nonprofit status. I think we go in to the Secretary of State website and check and see if you're on their nonprofit list. But yeah, absolutely. As long as you get that before the due date, you bet, come on in.
Your pre-application process asks whether the project is a community center. What is the intention behind that question? I think about the names Family YMCA, which serves youth and families, and you mentioned that they qualified for a Commerce grant. Please illuminate.
You bet. So names in particular is because we're just funding the teen center, right? We're not funding anything else. And then the question about community centers, because we got a whole different grant for community centers. It's called the Building Communities Fund, and it will be coming out in a couple months. I think there's BFA next week, Building for the Arts. And then probably a month after that will be the Building Communities Fund. And I'd love to talk about Building Communities Fund really quick. The idea is that it's a one-stop shop for social service delivery, right? So it's a community center, it's a food bank, it's a health clinic, it's as much as you could cram into that site. And the idea being folks don't have to go all over town to get the help that you need. And that's why that question is there, because we got a whole separate grant just for you.
I echo Joanne's question. Our organization's name has community center in it, but we primarily serve youth.
That's okay. We're not going to get hung up on names. If you're serving a lot of youth and maybe some other population, again, we'll prorate it by percentage, but yeah, that's not going to kill you.
Are local levy are local levy dollars considered state dollars?
No, not at all. They would be probably local government dollars.
Do we have to have a location before applying?
Yes, you're going to need that because you're going to need to be able to give us an accurate project budget, right? So it sounds like if you don't have a location, you're too early. The good news is that 3-year look back. You can come back in 2 years and get reimbursed for costs starting July 1 of this year. So if you don't have a location yet, you're more than likely too early. Come on back in the next round. But again, if you have more questions, give me a holler. We'll figure it out.
If a project has multiple funded partners, each a separate entity, may each party apply for a grant separately based upon their own level of indebtedness commitment?
No. If each party has site control over a distinct portion of the facility and can submit to us completely separate budgets, scopes of work, source of funds, then yes. But otherwise, there needs to be one applicant who controls the entire project site and the programming that goes in.
Can a partnership that includes a nonprofit, a city, and a school district apply?
Only the nonprofit can apply, and that nonprofit has to have control over whatever they're applying for. So they would need to control the sites for the other two, and getting site control from a local government could be tricky. You might be able to get a long-term lease, but the nonprofit would have to control the programming as well. So the short answer is probably not.
Can the in-kind be part of the matching funds, meaning in-kind service labor?
We can reimburse you for that, and the short answer is yes. That's an easy answer.
Just confirming, all qualifying expenses incurred after July 1, 2020 are eligible for reimbursement.
Absolutely.
Also, are aquatic centers and youth facilities eligible?
Generally, no, unless they serve the entire, unless they serve a vast majority of youth. We'll take a look at it again, because having an aquatic facility that serves just youth is probably not going to happen. But in other words, probably not, because of the social service and educational component as well. There would have to be one of those two on site as well. But I won't rule it out, right? Give me a holler, we'll take a look at it.
What ages are considered youth?
K through 12.
Can an outdoor playground area be included as part of the indoor facility?
No, strictly indoor, and that's by statute.
Who determines if you're in a rural area or underserved, or serving underserved area?
You can make a case for it. There's also, we need to check on this too, Beth, don't let me forget. There's a list of what I think it's not one of these, it's not Treasury, but one of the state agencies creates a list of what they call distressed counties. And I think you can get 5 points if you're in one of these counties. We're waiting for the updated list to come out, and it'll be any day now. And what that is, it's an aggregation of unemployment statistics that go back 3 years. And this agency determines what a distressed county is or not. So, but that's just one way. You can tell us, if you got the numbers, you can tell us if you're an underserved community or not.
Could a splash pad as part of a bigger youth project be eligible?
If it's outdoor, no. And just a quickie on splash pads, there was actually a direct appropriation for a splash pad. And I just want to pass this on. It got it built, it was beautiful. It cost a ton of money to operate, a ton of money. So just put that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about splash pads.
Is there a limit on how many sites you can apply for, separate branches?
3.
Our project has received a grant from BCF. Are we now ineligible for YRF grant?
The short answer is yes. If there's a separate, discrete portion where BCF is funding one chunk and YRF is funding another, then you can come for the separate portion. But no, we can't combine the two.
Can you speak more on what you want for the educational and social services component? Are you thinking tutoring services? Please elaborate on what you are wanting to see being offered, please.
Good question. So it could be a lot of different things. Tutoring, anything really, educational, social, tutoring. And again, it doesn't have to be both. It could be educational and or social service. Tutoring, reduced meat, after school meals, just about anything that you could consider a social service. Educational, easier to describe what it can't be. Every so often we'll get applications for longhouses, for crew, and most often they'll say, well, the educational component is teaching them how to row, and that doesn't cut it. To be eligible, that project would have to have a building, part of the longhouse, where they offer the educational and social services, where education is not just coaching them up on how to row. I hope that helps. If you have any other examples, give me a shout and we'll talk about it.
What documents will you accept for site control? We currently only have an MOU.
We've had lots of problems with MOUs, right? What we want to see is something that's ironclad. Generally, MOUs are not ironclad, and we don't want to take them. There are certain circumstances where we'll take a look at it if it's tight as a drum. But the one that I think of mostly is on Bureau of Indian Affairs land. There's a Boys and Girls Club that I'm thinking of that they want to do or renovate on EIA land, and it can be problematic for a number of reasons. So generally, we want to, if you've got an MOU, boy, we want to see a lease. We want to make sure that you're going to be there and it's ironclad.
That looks to be the last of all the questions.
Wow, what time is it? Boy,
10:13.
I want to open it up to the panel, right? Is there anything I've missed or any other points that you want to bring up? Heather, do you want to touch briefly on securitization?
Sure. So what we do through securitization is you'll be required to, and it depends on the threshold and the dollar amount, but we require that you execute a note, a deed of trust, which is recorded against the land records, the property that you own. And in some cases will require a covenant. It just depends. We'd have to look at the property and get all the information before we move forward with that. So that's just a brief summary.
Could you speak briefly to a leasehold deed of trust?
Sure. So a leasehold deed of trust is recorded against the leasehold estate. So essentially, when you sign the lease, the lease will be recorded against the property. The deed of trust will be secured only against the leasehold estate owned by you, so to speak. So it doesn't get secured against the title ownership of the parties owning the property.
There you have it. That's for folks who are leasing a facility who want to renovate the facility. And Heather and her team are sharp as tacks. Right? But this will only apply at the end of the day when you want to receive your funds if you've already got a grant. But I wanted her to touch on that.
Yeah, and we're here to walk you through the entire process. So it's new to a lot of people. So we're with you every step of the way.
Absolutely. I can vouch for that. Cheryl, Beth,
There's a couple more questions that are
sorry, bring them on.
coming here, and it says, what is the best way to connect to have one-on-one conversations?
Any one of us, if it's a really complicated one, give me a call. Let's see, could someone drop my phone number and email in the chat? I thought I saw someone asking for that. You can also contact Beth. She manages all of our competitive programs, which have very similar requirements. And then Rania, we can drop, once you guys drop, Beth, drop your and Rania's contact info as well. She manages this particular program. She started about 3 months ago, so she's still getting up to speed. But any one of us can answer any of your questions, or at least I try it. We got more there, Michelle?
Nope.
Love it.